We are joined here today at Nova Lab Studios in downtown by Dr. Christie Kederian. Dr. Christie, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Minwa.
Of course. We were talking earlier. Unfortunately, we're doing this remotely because of the ongoing fires.
Yes.
But what can you do?
Mm-hmm.
You gotta make it work somehow. But glad that we were able to have you on. I know we've been going back and forth for some time, so I'm excited to be able to have the conversation with you. So let's just get into it. So can you share with us like your background and leading to where you are now?
Sure. So I am a native SoCal girl, born and raised in Pasadena. And I moved about 3 minutes from my childhood home when we got married. So not very far. We're all near the fires, unfortunately. So sending love and prayers to these communities um, during this time. And a lot of my story and my career and personal journey has to do with my personality and my love of relationships and connecting other people. So from an early age, I was the person that all my friends would come to for advice or, just I would like giving advice. I'd be the friend that wanted to connect everybody with each other. And that kind of developed. I was always like an extrovert as well as somebody who just enjoyed being around other people. So as you can imagine, the pandemic's been difficult for me. So my cultural background is as an Armenian American, and both of my parents immigrated here from Lebanon. And so my culture, as well as my faith as a Christian, have really informed every part of my personal and professional career. And my mom was my inspiration for studying psychology. And I kind of put together that thread of relationships and loving learning about people and kind of what makes them be how they are. And so I studied psychology as well as music industry at USC. I've always also loved music, and I play the piano and the bass guitar and the guitar. So those were kind of my two passions, and I kind of saw them integrated in a lot of ways. I studied marriage and family therapy and started working as a therapist, as well as in the fields of mental health and marketing. And this theme of kind of connecting people with each other and connecting with people has kind of followed me throughout. Where I landed upon my work as a matchmaker, which kind of led me to where I am today. I worked at eHarmony and affiliated services with Match.com to help people find love, and have matched hundreds of people and seen weddings and babies, and now have since transitioned into becoming a dating coach and helping people, just empowering them with the tools they need to find love in this digital age, and especially this year in the pandemic. So that's a little bit of a background on how I've kind of come to where I am today in my work life. And personally, a lot of what I share with clients, I also kind of use and tried out on my own. I started using dating apps in 2015, and was just recently married this last year. We just made the not having to have a quarantine wedding.
Congratulations.
And thank you. Yeah. So kind of now newly exploring newlywed life, but I love kind of sharing my personal journey and learning from all my setbacks in dating and kind of experimenting in that world, and then sharing it with other people, and specifically people in my community. So I've worked with a lot of Armenians as well, people in the Christian background, and also female entrepreneurs, and just kind of learning what some of the mindset blocks are, using my background as a therapist and helping people kind of get out of their own way to find love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we'll unpack all of that. The one thing that I found interesting from the beginning part you were mentioning. So you said studied psychology and music industry.
Yes.
So that's probably the only time I've heard that combination. Wait.
Yeah.
So you went into it picking, these are what I'm interested in, so this is what I'm going to study.
Yeah, exactly. And I kind of thought, well, I'll figure out a way to combine both of these things. And I had my own radio show that was called the Lyric Therapy Hour. And I basically answered viewers' questions and then found songs whose lyrics kind of incorporated some therapeutic themes to answer those questions as well. So I found I did some work in the music industry as well, and found that I loved music, but I also felt that I loved like working with people, and it was kind of a passion that could keep on giving throughout a lifespan. Whereas working, I'm sure you know, a lot of people working in Hollywood, it kind of peters out at some point of,
I'm sure.
okay, I want to choose my life and my family, which is a constant. I kind of did study this in my research specifically with Armenian women in leadership, but there is a constant struggle for women thinking at some point they have to choose like their career or family. And I always felt like I never wanted to do that. So I wanted to pave my own path and figure out a way to do everything, have it all.
So are you still finding that you're working on finding that balance?
Yeah, I think that having my own business and making my own rules has really been the thing that's helped me overcome that. So in my own business now, I work as a therapist, coach, and consultant. So I kind of implement all of my education, and I do work with a lot of creative professionals, people in the music industry, some high profile people in the coaching world. So all my experience, I feel like, feeds what I do. But because I'm able to be the CEO of my own life, so to speak, then I can kind of choose, to have coffee with my dad in the middle of a workday, or, do this podcast in the evening because I've kind of worked my schedule in a certain way. So I think that right now it's a really nice balance, but I know a lot of people don't have that privilege or haven't taken that leap yet, or it doesn't work in their industry. So I think that some of those, and I have also seen a lot of organizations in my own personal research making that shift now in a, pandemic world of needing to create flexibility for, both the, parents or working moms. I don't have kids yet, but one day kind of ideally these organizations will create those flexible boundaries so that they can keep great talent and still be able to, people don't have to feel like they are abandoning their kids or their family for their work. But I think that there's always seasons. Like right now I'm in a launch mode. So me and my husband, we couldn't, have dinner together or whatever. There's different seasons of your work life. So, but I think overall, knowing what my values are and that family is most important to me, that is going to work. I'm going to make my business work around my lifestyle and not the other way around.
Right. Yeah, that's probably I would think the most critical part of that when you're trying to find the fine line between career and personal is you pick what's most important to you and then build around that. So like I would think for most it's going to be what your values of maybe typically family, maybe not for some people, but example you gave was that. So you're going to put that in the middle, then work around it and cater to that to be able to situate your time however you need to.
Yeah, exactly.
So you mentioned you were at eHarmony. Mm-hmm. Was that like right after college, or did you work a little bit and then go there?
Yeah, so I worked. I actually went and worked at eHarmony after I was licensed. Mm-hmm. So I started my career working in El Monte. It's a city kind of in San Gabriel Valley, working at the police department community center. So with underprivileged youth and families. And then I worked in group practice, as well as started working in treatment centers with women who struggle with eating disorders. And then a lot of my work in my own private practice started around 2015 was with couples or singles. So that's really where a lot of my training came. And then I started working at eHarmony after that, using my therapeutic skills, but as a matchmaker. So different than therapy. It's more coaching and directive, as well as me using my psychological knowledge to vet people and get to know, who might be a fit and then match them. So that kind of was a way to use my skills in a different way than therapy.
So how would that work? Because eHarmony is online, right? So how would you actually matchmake people, or did they have like in-person stuff too?
Yeah, so it was basically set up as a startup under eHarmony called EH Plus. So, and we were a team of therapists that worked with people who wanted a higher level experience than what they received online. So what we would do, we'd still use the algorithm, and our personal clients, we would see who their compatible matches were. And then we would interview them based on what we know about our clients. We get to know our clients really well, what they're looking for. We interview and get to know a potential match. And if we felt like they were a good fit, we would connect them for a date. So it kind of takes the swiping and them matching and them messaging out of it, just goes directly from vetting to a date. So it was obviously the online platform is one thing, and then it was its own separate business, basically.
Okay, that's interesting. Do you know if that's still going on?
Yes, they actually ended up closing, right, like I was the last, a few of the last employees that we closed out that service. I think one of the biggest struggles in the world of matchmaking is the inability to scale. So that was a constant issue that was coming up around just not being able to scale the work. You know, we were a bunch of therapists doing the work, but there wasn't a way to take us out of it, because the whole purpose of the matchmaking is that has the person in between. So that's why you'll find most matchmaking services now are more boutique, and do provide that one-on-one and are a lot higher ticket, more expensive services. And so I think they're still trying to figure out, is there a middle ground way to do this and meets, someone who's not, Brad Pitt.
Right. So it's funny, when I stumbled upon your page, because I was trying to find someone like you to talk to, like in this kind of field of career. And then when I saw yours, I'm like, okay, perfect. This is kind of what I want to talk about. But then as I was reading, I'm like, that's such an interesting thing to think about. Like you're a matchmaker, and then the only other time I've even heard of this as like a career. Well, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the show How I Met Your Mother. There's like Ted Goes to One.
Yeah.
And then so that's like as you were talking just now, that clicked with me. I was like, wait, that's like the only other instance I can remember ever even hearing, because you were mentioning like the boutique matchmakers. I'm like, that's the only instance I can think of where I was like, oh wait, that's actually a real thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it makes sense to me though, like that is an option, but I honestly I don't hear it ever discussed. So I know you said what this example you gave was a boutique matchmaker, but would you say like they're all kind of boutique, like in terms of like it's already kind of a specialized thing? Like, are there some that are just like super popular? Like, how's it work really? All of that with matchmaking?
Yeah, there are a few that are more, wide scale. So the other company that I worked for, called 3-Day Rule, is affiliated with Match.com and the Match Group. Match.com owns, a lot of dating sites: OkCupid, JDate, Christian Mingle. So we'd work with them to kind of use their database, as well as provide some coaching. And 3-Day Rule is a national company, so it's still, small scale one-on-one work, but have matchmakers all across LA, San Francisco, New York, Boston, basically all the major cities. And there's a few other matchmaking services that are similar, that they're kind of widespread. But there are some that are like specifically in LA, or, there's a mother and daughter. I don't know, their name is kind of, losing the name, but they're in New York and they do it together. So it feels like smaller scale, but most matchmaking services do have a database that they are able to kind of pull people from. And the benefit of certain larger ones, such as the one I worked for, 3-Day Rule, is the database was a lot larger. So you're not trying to fit. Often some of the smaller ones are just trying to force their clients together, like, oh, you guys are both single, you should date. Whereas if you have more people to choose from, you have more opportunities to potentially find someone that could be a good fit. And then when I worked at 3-Day Rule, which is where a lot of my client success came from, and the features in the Wall Street Journal and the LA Times, we also had the flexibility, out different than eHarmony, to find people on our own. So if I ran into somebody at the supermarket or saw somebody on Instagram, a lot of my success stories came from messaging people on Instagram that I was like, oh, they look, potentially eligible and single, or, a friend of a friend. Like, I had more of the freedom to say, oh, I think they could be a good fit, even if they didn't meet the, percentage, which as in that How I Met Your Mother episode, she was like, there's no one there for you.
Yeah.
Compatible. So I like that. Obviously having my doctorate in psychology, I think there is so much that eHarmony has kind of set the playing field for dating sites in general to have more of that science-based approach of, okay, these are things that make you compatible, not just what some swipe apps do of just like, oh, are they near you and are they attractive? Yes, no. So I do think it's really important to kind of think more complex about who we're matching with, but I like having a little bit of freedom. Sometimes I always would tell clients that sometimes I'll see two people on paper, I'll meet them and I'm like, these two people are soulmates, like this is it, like, and I just can't wait. I'm like waiting by my phone to see if, they hit it off, and then neither of them felt anything on the date. And then there's like one of my success stories that they just had a baby during the pandemic. I thought that my client, the female, was going to be like so upset at me that I sent her this match, and then they ended up hitting it off on the first date. It was like a 4-hour day. I'm like, oh, okay, good. So I kind of took a risk, and then it worked. So I think that it's nice to kind of have the flexibility. And I think that's important for people just dating on their own too, to not put so much like pressure and kind of take some risks and be open, because you kind of never know. I always say there's like an art and science to finding your person. So you can kind of be more methodical or values driven and be like, okay, these are things I'm looking for, but you have to leave room for that like chemistry, because that's something you can't really control.
Right. So you mentioned part of what you were doing when you were at 3 Day Rule was like if you stumbled upon people, you would reach out to them. So how would you kind of gauge that? Because that's an interesting concept to hear about. Because like, yeah, I guess how would you know? Is there like something internal with you that like, well, this seems like a person that would be a fit for? Like, yeah, how would you approach it?
As far as finding people on Instagram that I think would be a good fit for my clients, one of my success stories was an example of that, because I had come across this page. Actually, he was tagged at one of those like dive bar type places and was a drummer. And my client was just like taking drum lessons for fun. And then I went through his Instagram page, and it was just like all pictures of food. He was like a huge foodie, and she is like a huge foodie. And I was like, oh, he seems cool, whatever. I'll message him and just see. And then we had a video chat to, kind of chat and see if he's a good fit. Honestly, it was a match of like temperament, because she was like a professor, but actually if you meet her, she's like really fun, really lively, like not at all professor type. And he's like typical like musician artist. So probably if you saw two of them in the street, you wouldn't be like, oh, they're the match made in heaven. And actually he told me later on that he had seen her profile on Bumble before, but just assumed that, she was a professor, and was like, oh no, I don't want like someone like that. But then when he met her, it was like all of those stereotypes went out the window. So it was honestly kind of a hunch. And because he was, when in our video call, he said, oh yeah, I'm actually from this town. And it was kind of a weird coincidence. I'm like, okay, well, let's just see how it goes. And then it ended up, the rest is history, as they say.
When you would reach out to people, would you ever like be, I guess, nervous or kind of have trepidation reaching out, like in terms of what's the reception going to be to the message? Or is it, let's just do it anyway and see what happens?
Not really online. I think definitely in person. Most of my friends hated going out with me, because I'd always be like, oh, that person looks single, I'm just going to go up to them. Most people, I would say, were like flattered or intrigued. They're like, oh, like matchmaker thinks I'm like a good fit. So I think that you get away with a lot by saying you're a matchmaker that you might not when you're not, and just reading on people's profiles. So yeah. So and at the time, most of the time that I was matchmaking, I was single. So a lot of times I would get like, oh, like, is this for you? Are you single or whatever? If it was someone in my demographic, but obviously keeping it very professional, it would be like, no, it's not for me. I'm taken or whatever.
Yeah. So 2015, you said you tried the dating apps?
2015 was the first time I ever tried dating apps. And it was me and my two best friends were like, oh, we should try this. Mostly they did it for me because that's when I was applying for the eHarmony job. And I was like, well, I should probably figure out what online dating is like if I'm going to work at eHarmony. So we just kind of did it as like a, fun thing. And then I, for myself, would use it on and off. But it would definitely be a struggle because I would be dating for other people all day in my job. And then I'd be like, all right, now I have to date. And I would just be sick of talking to people, which is hard to believe because I love talking to people. But it was definitely one of those things that was more on and off because I was so in the game, for my job. It's hard to it was hard to not do that.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear because it makes sense though, because like you said, you're doing it. It's already like your job, and then it's like an extension of your job. Exactly. Once you leave. But so I'm curious, while you were using it though, did you notice, like, what was your take on it? Because I'll hear different takes on it. Most of it generally, I feel like people are like not happy about them, yet there are so many people that are on them. So I'm always wondering, I'm like, so which is it? Do you like it or you don't like it?
Yeah, it's like one of those train wrecks you can't pull away from.
Yeah.
So and it might just because of, blame it on the day job. I like really enjoyed being on dating apps and liked dating in general. I also think that with everything I knew about relationships, before I became a matchmaker, and one of my motivations to work on the other side of this was I was working for couples who were kind of struggling or on the outs or like things went wrong. And I was like trying to help fix them. So through that work, and obviously I have like very supportive like family and never had like pressure to like, oh, I need to, find somebody. So I kind of just used it as something to like, kind of use as a social experiment, but also just kind of enjoy. And because I have done so much like research and helping people figure out what they're looking for on the app, I knew, and this is what I say all the time, it's like, if you know how to use the tool, then, it's just a tool. It's not the actual app that's your enemy or that's giving you a hard time or whatever people complain about. It's just the way that you're using it. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things that became my passion in working with people is, I say this all the time, like, makeup artists use the same makeup that you could buy in a store, but the way that they apply it makes you look one way, and the way that you might apply it does not make you look as good. So
that's a very good analogy.
So I really try to teach people and help them get out of that negative mindset, because ultimately, people are meeting. I think the latest stat was like over 47% of marriages are meeting online. So it's like almost half of people. Wow. Dating right now. Yeah. And I could cite it for you as well, if that's of interest, but it's like so many people are meeting online now. So it's one of those things, especially in COVID, if I'm meeting people, unless you're a celebrity or a doctor, teacher, someone who's like really doesn't want to match with, their students on a dating app, there's not that much excuse to not be on it, especially during the pandemic, because even people who prefer to bump in and would go up to someone in a coffee shop don't have that opportunity anymore. So I think now is a better time than ever. And personally, I didn't hate going on dating apps because I was very focused on who I wanted to talk to and connect with. I really knew who I was and who I wanted to be with. And then that made it like easier to not go on a bunch of terrible first dates.
All right. Which ones were you using?
Yeah, so I basically tried all of them, partially as like social experiment, but some of them I wouldn't have been on for myself, but I obviously was on eHarmony. I never was on Match, don't tell them because I worked with them, but I never tried Match. I was on Bumble, Hinge, Coffee Meets Bagel, The League. And was that all the ones I tried? Yeah, I think that's everything that I tried.
Because I feel like some of them, I guess the more popular ones have stigmas behind them too, right? Like Tinder's the quote unquote hookup.
Yeah, I was never on
Bumble is the more, Bumble's the more like if you're actually trying to date. And then those are the two biggest ones that I can think of that I always this is what this one means and this is what the other one means.
Yeah,
because I think I think you posted something today, or I was reading something of yours earlier, where you were saying like and you mentioned it earlier today too, like your mindset of it matters. So I think if you're approaching it with, oh, well, this is a hookup app, like what am I going to find? Probably nothing if that's the case. Or, because look, there's obviously people that do that, but also there's a bunch of people on the platform. So chances are maybe you'll find someone that's not looking for that. I know someone that was on the app and they're still dating them and they're dating.
Right.
They're not just, doing whatever.
Yeah.
So I think it has its, because I could talk about it with friends too. I think you have to be patient as well. I think is part of it with those. And you have to like tweak it around because again, since it is algorithmically driven,
yeah,
that's, sometimes it's like you might think, oh, this looks all fine and dandy, but if the algorithm doesn't think so, then no one else might find out if it's fine or dandy.
Yeah. That's exactly true. And that's another analogy that I use with clients all the time. It's like the same as social media. Everyone's hating on this app's algorithm or Instagram's algorithm. No one's seen your post, but you're still on it because it's better than not being on it. So I think that that's similar. And I actually have developed a like free guide that, people can pick up on my website too, that I'll share that helps to tell you what the best dating app is for you based on your personality. Because like you said, I think it's a game of patience, because ultimately when I hear someone say, and I hear this from people all day long, oh, I hate this app, or this app's the worst, or whatever. It's actually something about using the app, or like the setup, or the the like vision of the app isn't aligned with you and how you work. It has too many people. It doesn't have enough people. The way that the photos or the questions are set up, you aren't really attracting your ideal person, whatever it is. More about the actual, which app can keep you in the game longest and not have you given to discouragement, because at the end, if you are looking for a relationship, you're only looking for one person. So you really have to like stick it out to figure out if someone's going to be the right person, and not just like give up because you're like, oh, this app is the worst. It's not really the app. It's like just kind of whatever your perception of how it's working for you is.
Do you know, maybe you knew when you were working during your work, but is there a reason why these apps are so guarded with their algorithm? Is it just kind of like possibly is it more like the fears like other companies capitalizing on it, or something else?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think that overall, eHarmony was pretty open with their algorithm about like their compatibility. And you could tell by taking my clients would always complain it was a super long assessment of like asking different questions. You kind of tell what they were getting at. Mm-hmm. And in the founder of eHarmony's writings, he was like pretty clear about, these are the 29 dimensions of compatibility, and we're measuring these as we find your match. But I think that overall, a lot of dating apps, specifically like people, they want that retention. I know they're trying to do a lot of things to actually get people to go on a date. And that's another really big like hurdle that they're trying to overcome. But I think that things that I know to be true is that when they definitely front load it. So every app, when you first download it, you're going to feel like, wow, these are the best people ever. And then it's going to feel like a dry spell or whatever. But I do always say that, like, if you're feeling like it's dry, maybe try downloading a different app, or downloading a new app, or updating it, messaging people back, these sorts of things. Similar mindset you might have to your Instagram algorithm, like apply it to your dating app. Those I think are generally true. And another hack I think is important to keep in mind. Sometimes people struggle, especially women I work with, around like perceived rejection, of thinking like, oh, you liked this guy and they didn't like you back. And then, oh, it must be because I look this way or whatever. We all start internalizing things that are completely made up, because ultimately we don't know that users, activity level. Obviously, when I was on the back end, I would always look at that. And sometimes people wouldn't have been on the app for like months, or, like have a long time and just didn't deactivate it, but they're still showing up. So we really don't know why someone might not, match with you back. So try not to take that personally and make it something about yourself, because you don't know.
Yeah. What was that like, working on the back end and seeing data like that? And it was seeing that data then, have you seen it directly translate to what you do now?
Yeah, definitely. So I think that the biggest way it has is just when I'm working with clients one-on-one, learning about all of the mindset blocks that they have kind of created narratives around based on dating apps. It's kind of like a human versus computer sort of thing that's going on. Because yeah, so and I think another thing that happens pretty frequently, and then after when I would like ask my husband or like male clients or guys that I know, sometimes guys, and actually I think they did a study on this with Tinder, is like guys would match with girls just as a like self-esteem boost, that like, oh, look how many girls like you back. So like basically knowing everything that's going on behind the scenes. And I feel like we shouldn't take it too seriously, but we should again just kind of use it as a tool to move through. And a lot of the methods and formulas I teach clients now of like I teach them to getting from getting matched to getting on a date in like 5 messages back and forth. So you're not getting a pen pal through the dating app, ends up being really common. Or like, I have this method that I teach called the silver swipe bullet method of like figuring out, okay, what are you really laser focused on when you're swiping, of what type of person you are. Like, okay, yes, if faith is important to you, or cultural background, if their job or some sort of industry, that you want to date someone in there, like you just kind of have that laser focus, then you're able to get a lot closer to who you want, rather than getting tied up in the weeds or like talking yourself into matching with people or not matching with people or whatever. So it's more about kind of what your behavior is, rather than what's going on in the app.
Is there a common misperception, I guess, that you've noticed, like when you have clients coming to you about just dating in general? Like, is there one main one that seems like is common for women and one main one that seems common for men, or is there one that seems like it overlaps?
Yeah, I think that a very common one, for like both, I think for women, is that they're still under the impression that they can't initiate anything, including like messaging a guy first on the app. And I think that's like a really sad one, in my opinion, because you're putting so much meaning into just like sending a message. Obviously, I still believe in that it has to be reciprocated. You don't want to be constantly the one pursuing, but it's totally okay. And I want to hear your thoughts on this too. Of like, it's totally okay to like message first and just be like, hey, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
I think that women like are, because of that fear of rejection, they tend to just not try. But then I always say to clients, the only way you're going to lose or not find your person is if you give up. So that's the worst way. Whatever, you can just be like, okay, thank you, next, Ariana Grande, like this guy wasn't it, like go to the next person. And especially on a dating app, like they're not rejecting you as the person. They don't know you yet. You're just like a 2D whatever. They're just, there's so many potential reasons why someone might not match with you. So kind of moving past that, I think, is important. And I think for guys, I mean, there's so much conversation around this in general, but I think it's important to really like acknowledge the truth. This is said a lot, but guys are really like attraction focused or like visual focus. So like if you can embrace that as a guy and know that like, okay, I know I have to be attracted. Obviously there has to be more than that for the relationship to work, but to really be like, okay, I know that I have to feel that and not like try to make things happen that won't. If there isn't that attraction, I think that's really important too, because sometimes guys can feel guilty about that, but that I think it, sociologically we found is true. So it's better to just kind of embrace that and still look for other qualities in a long-term partner, but not try to like fight that.
Yeah. So I guess to go back to what you were mentioning about the messaging first thing, that's one of those things that I honestly never understood. But
Yeah.
I guess the fear of rejection aspect is one explanation. Mm-hmm. But to me, it doesn't seem like a good enough explanation. Because I knew people that were in relationships, and the girl is like, I'm not texting first until he texts me. That's like, are you? It's like you're already in it. Why does it? You're already signed up together. Why does it matter at this point? But even outside of that, I see it regularly where the girl will say, "I'm not messaging first, so just be aware of that ahead of time." It's like, why does it matter though? And so I guess part of it, I guess, is the fear of rejection. I don't know if there's anything else that's a more So that's more understandable in that there's like a hesitancy of, whatever. Maybe it's like a self-esteem thing. I
Right.
guess I'm more understanding of that. The other one that seems like it's sometimes at play is like it's more of a ego thing, and not like in the terms of, oh, I'm worried about it. It's more like, well, let's see how badly they're interested.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think that might be a play. That sometimes that one I'm not understanding of that at all. Like that's just like, come on. The other one, it's a little more understanding, but this one is like they're kind of being pretentious about it, if that's
Yeah,
the case.
yeah. Yeah, I think that that's true, and I really try to work with women. Actually, in every single woman I work with, we have to work around like what I call like men's issues of like we have all these like internalized or beliefs around, oh, like all guys think like this or whatever, like kind of putting guys into this like box. As well, even though I just say, there are some things we can know about attraction and things like that. I think it's not fair to say that like, okay, they have to like prove and we have to play these games. Like I think that is really toxic to building a good relationship, that you should not. And if you don't want somebody to play games with you, you shouldn't play games back. Like just be really clear, and then you teach people how to treat you. So when you're kind of exuding that energy and just being clear, if they choose to play games, like that's their own choice and it's not going to work out anyways, but you're going to sleep a lot better at night knowing you're not like, oh, okay, well, I know I have, friends and clients that have done that. Like, oh, he texted, I'm going to wait like 35 minutes. What? Like if you're available, just like answer. So there's a lot of these things we have to rewire so we can just be clear, and not view like dating as a game, but just more as like a process to find the right person.
Where does that come from? Do you happen to know where that waiting 35 minutes thing, or if they text me 20 minutes later, I'm gonna do 25, and then
Yeah,
is
yeah.
that like is it just something that's become cultural for us? Is it something that, like, I don't know, if has it been propagated through some medium that is just how it just trickled to everyone? Like where did this even come from? And has this always been a thing? Like I don't know. I feel like it's as long as I can remember that this has always been there. Like, no, dude, you gotta wait. You gotta
Yeah.
wait. So it's like why? And who told you?
Yeah. Yeah, I always say it's so funny because my husband broke like all of those protocols. Like he was just like so straightforward, like right away I knew he was interested. Like none of that was there. And when I would like tell my friends, they were like, this is so refreshing. I'm like, that's sad. Like everyone should just be like this. But I think I honestly think that it's a result, and I'll be the first person who is like a fan of dating apps, but I do think that dating apps have some cons to them. And part of it has become that like dynamic of like with technology, reading in between the lines and creating our own story. So if we have in our psychology past, hurt or rejection, insecurity, this is going back beyond past relationships, into childhood. If we have those stories, then anything that happens in our dating life triggers that. So even if it's just, oh, this guy didn't match me back, you're telling yourself the story of back when, you had this like family issue or abandonment or whatever happened. So it's really triggering that for us. And then we go into protection mode. So, and that really kills your dating life, because in dating and getting to know somebody, you're trying to build connection. But the only way that you can do that is be vulnerable and be open to that and risk that hurt. So, and I think that anyone who's falling in love has to risk. That's part of it. You're risking that you are being open and sharing your feelings and ultimately, your life with that person. And there's no guarantees, but you have to risk in order to, have the reward of that connection. So I think that it's kind of one of those nuanced things that the more that we're able to deal with some of our feelings in general that go back, the more that won't be as early of a trigger. And I think that other relationships or dynamics kind of come through that. But I like to help clients kind of work through those past relationships that have helped create that story, and then go back and rewrite that. And I think that that's really important to do so that you're not creating truths that aren't actually applicable to everybody.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those things I always wonder about. And then it's funny when you mentioned you worked at a place called 3 Day Rule. Can I ask why it was called 3 Day Rule?
Yeah. So have you seen the movie The Swingers? with like Vince Vaughn, and it was like a movie in the 90s. But
I don't think
basically,
so.
the company is like a play off of something that what the guy in the movie says. He's like, oh, like you have to wait 3 days to call a girl
I figured.
after the first date, and then basically the company is like trying to rewrite the rules and be like, no, there's no such thing as the 3-day rule. So yeah, but so we would kind of go in and be like, there's no such thing as rules. And I'll venture to say that most of the couples that I matched that became successful broke pretty much all of those rules, or the right things to do. Like I always share this, like after my husband and I had our first phone call, we talked for like 3 hours for the first phone call, and I broke all my own rules because I always tell clients like, phone call, no, like, especially if you've never met before, keep that to like 25 minutes, 30 minutes tops. Like, you gotta wait for the in-person date. And then after we hung up, he texted me back and was like, hey, would it be weird if I called you again? Like, I really enjoyed talking to you. And this is during the holidays, so we had time off. And I was like, sure. So then we kept talking. I was like, this is the worst. Like, I knew that if I told my coworkers that I did that, I spent like 5 hours on a phone call before I met the guy, they would be like, man, you can't take your own advice. But he just felt like, talking. So he said that. So I think that like that honesty is really like important because you're allowing yourself, like, you don't have to. I think vulnerability sometimes gets a bad reputation because you'll be perceived like in a certain way. But I think like there's a difference between vulnerability and just like knowing who you are and what you want, and not like compromising that either. Like, nobody has time to wait around to see if a text is going to come through or not. Like, you have better things to do. If they want to play that game, that's cool. Like, you can move on to the next.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's it's funny, going through all of this, because it's something that we always talk about amongst friends.
Yeah.
Because you're always like, why are this way, or why does this happen, or this rule, that rule, like who came up with them? But
yeah.
and so the fact that when I asked about the name and you mentioned it's a play off of a 90s movie, I'm like, well, there you go. That's already 30 years ago.
Yeah,
So that's
years ago, right? Yeah. There were rules back then.
Yeah, it's just very funny, going through all that and talking about it. One of there's something else that I think I know the answer, but I just want to kind of hear what you have to say. So, a thing now that is common with these apps, it's probably was common anyway before, but I guess it was more like made more even emphasized with these apps, has been like the whole thing with ghosting, for example, right? Where you might go, I don't know, let's say like a day of talking, and then just nothing anymore. Or you might go a period of time of talking, and then you just don't hear, like out of nowhere. Like the shorter ones, I think make more sense. I'm like, the person is just probably like, whatever. So, yeah. But there's sometimes where I've heard of like longer periods of time. It's like, geez, that's kind of brutal.
Yeah.
So with that, what I think it is just people don't want to deal with the confrontation of, hey, I don't want to talk to you anymore. Is that what it is, or are some people kind of like a person's backup plan? So by that I mean, let's say you were talking for a couple weeks and the person stops responding. It's maybe because there was maybe a couple people that were in the conversation, and then you just happened to fall out of the cycle, right, and they moved forward. So what do you think it is, or is it a multitude of things?
So it's one of those things, like, don't judge yourself, because I think we've all been there. If you've been on a dating app, you might have been the ghoster, you might have been ghosted. But I do think that it is a byproduct of not matching and swiping with intention. So I think kind of what happens is, like I mentioned, like, people are like, whatever, maybe, I don't know. And then they accept the person. And then the other person might be the same way with you. Like, I don't know, whatever, we'll give it a shot. And then nobody sends a message back and forth because we weren't really into it anyways. So I think that it kind of comes from, if you're on the fence about somebody, figure out why. Like, okay, what am I on the fence on? Maybe, like, I don't really know what they do, or I don't know. I don't really know if I'm attracted to them. Okay. So how will you figure that out? Okay. Maybe you can ask a few questions on the app. So I do this a lot with my clients from a Christian background. Like maybe they really want someone who's a Christian. Maybe the like drop down thing says the guy's a Christian, but they don't really know. So I'll help them figure out, okay, like how can you ask questions? One of the common ones they say is like, oh, so what are you up to this weekend? And then if they don't respond with anything that has to do with like church, and then on the other hand, and then they ask you, oh, I'm going to church, whatever. I saw you're a Christian. Like, do you go to church? And then if they're like, no, not really, I'd be like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I'm actually looking for someone who's like more committed in their like faith, but wish you the best. Like, pretty easy, didn't take you too long,
Yeah.
like, and you figured out, you got your answer. So if you feel like you're on the fence with somebody, but there isn't a way to get that answer, then probably don't match them, is what I would say. But that's what I mean by being a little bit more reflective about who you're matching with. And it kind of then creates that ripple effect throughout dating apps, that we're not all just kind of like on the fence about everybody, and then nobody messages anybody, and then why are we on the apps? So I think that it's important to kind of be but I do think like if you never message each other, then fine. Like you don't have to be like, hey, I don't think we're a fit because I changed my mind. I'm talking to 4 other people.
That'd be a weird opener.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But if you have been talking, I think it's totally fine to say like, hey, I think I'm going to explore, another match, but wish you the best or whatever. But this is another reason why I don't think you should just be like texting or on messaging back and forth for long, long periods of time, especially now in the pandemic. Like there's really not a reason why you can't jump on a video, like chat and just say hi, and then see if there's potentially anything to keep it going.
Yeah, I feel the same way with that. I've spoken with people that are like kind of questioning, is what is too soon and what's too long. Mm-hmm. And you kind of alluded to, what was it? You said 5 messages before what was it? 5 messages, and then what happens?
Yeah, then you should be on a video date right now.
I don't think that's unreasonable, but I think for some people they're like, what the heck, 5 messages? Like that's maybe because for me it's like, let's just get to the point.
Right messages.
Yeah, I'm very straightforward with this. Like, are we doing this or not? Like,
yeah.
What's the point of the whole song and dance?
Maybe not a video date, maybe a phone call or something.
Yeah.
If you want, like something that is like giving you a connection, because how much information are you trying to get over text message? Like, I think this is another problem we have in our generation. It's like everything's over text. Like, why? We can just pick up the phone and it probably communicate it a lot quicker also. But there's not that much that I think you should be learning about someone via text message.
Yeah, and also you can't really tell what is truthful and what isn't, because there's no facial expression, there's no body language right behind the text. So you can say anything and you wouldn't really know. And then that's the whole other issue with texting, is like you read between the lines. Like, what does this mean? What does that mean? What's this genuine?
Yeah, and you don't even know the person, so how can you even read between the lines?
Yeah.
In my mind, like if they are, I help kind of, it's like a funnel for a match. Like you kind of, okay, like you're somewhat interested, like they seem like they meet their values. There's one big question mark potentially. Then in the messaging, you're going to figure that out. Oh, I see you're a consultant, that you want to figure out like what kind of consultant they are, or like do they actually have like a decent like career or whatever. Then ask them a little bit about their job. Okay, cool. Hey, like I'd love to, I don't really come on the app that much, or work's really busy, would you be open for a phone call? Like super like out of the, we're wanting to move through the app, not like live there.
Yeah. One of the things I've kind of ran across with those is like, and it maybe isn't directly related to the conversation, but just something I always wonder. It's just always they preface it with, "I'm not here a lot, so find me on some other platform."
Yeah. Definitely not. Don't put your social media. That is no.
That's such a strange concept to me, because it's like this is a public thing, so anyone that downloads it is within their they determine the mileage. So if they're like 100 miles out, they can still possibly see you. So you don't know who they are, and now they have access to your social media. Yeah. So that's the way I look at it, and I will think maybe other people too. So is the only thing that usually leads me to is like, well, they just want someone, like, I guess, to follow them, like to raise it up. And I've had, and I think someone gave me like a counter to that, which I'm kind of looking for because I can't think of one. And I think it was just simply like maybe that's their preferred form of contact. And I think probably for a lot of people it is versus the actual app itself. But the whole point, I think the match is like that's like the filter, right? You get it. Okay, do I want to keep talking? Okay, then I'll give it. So I can't really come to another conclusion besides they just want like following.
Yeah. I think it's like following. Sometimes they want like potentially them to kind of see more of their life. But again, I go back to you should just explain your life to the person at that point. And then maybe they don't feel comfortable giving their phone number. That's another option. But a lot of the dating app platforms now have video like, integration. So you can actually video chat or phone call on the app. So you don't need to give a phone number, or you can give like a Google Voice maybe or something like that. If you don't feel comfortable giving your actual phone number. But I just think those are all like limiting beliefs around why you shouldn't be connecting with the person over the phone, or just more human contact. Like the app is meant for you to like connect and then come off the app. Eventually, if the app's done its job, you will be off the app forever.
Yeah. Do you think that obviously that's the goal of it, but if that were the case, then people would not be on as long. So is that kind of the point of the front loading, is like where you kind of get a taste of it, you get your hopes up, maybe you get your ego up a little bit, like, okay, I'm happening. And then that's the dry spell comes. It's like, okay, let me wait a little bit. And then next thing you know, it's been like 2-3 months. You're like, how much money have I put into it? Like, so is that part of the whole thing with them? Is like, so obviously it's a business. They have to make money, but also it's like, well, what's the mission of the business? Is it to help people find someone else? Okay. So how long are we trying to keep them on? So I'm curious if it's like by app, maybe some apps are generally really more pushing like, no, let's get them off as quickly as possible. And maybe some it's a little more, not sinister, but a little more, maybe capitalistic, where it's like, let's have them find someone, but let's have it take a little bit of time so we get something on our end.
Yeah. Well, ultimately they want you to stay on their app. So that's why they want to kind of, first impressions matter, right? So they want to give a first impression that, oh, this is such a great app. It's so much better than this other app that I hated. And that's why I moved to this app. They want to get you like encouraged. And they also, like any other business or tech platform, want to get information about you. What are your user habits? Are you swiping a lot? Are you messaging a lot? Are you not messaging at all? Are you filling out their things about, did you guys go on a date or whatever? Like, are you giving kind of that info? So they're getting info on you and you're getting info about the app. But again, like I say, ultimately you could be on the app for 5 years and then you're on your 800th match and then that person's the one. So it's like, again, it's not really about the app, but they do kind of want to learn more about you as well. And ultimately, I think the intention of the apps is that people are going to tell their friends, oh, I met on this, or they're going to use for their advertising. And we met on Coffee Meets Bagel, we met on Hinge or whatever. And then they're going to get more like-minded people on the app that, they want to kind of create that image. And like some of the apps like Hinge, it's kind of, or the League kind of set themselves up as, oh, we're like more elite. If you went to like you're higher educated or you have this job, like we're a little bit more exclusive. And then Bumble kind of created that like women empowerment, like, we can decide, who we connect with. And then there's more like the niched apps of like, based on your faith background, like JDate or that sort of thing. So they've kind of created some way to help meet your need, but they also want to like help their own, database, so to speak.
Yeah, makes sense. So okay, so to pivot from the dating apps, so when you were mentioning like you've done where you're helping people you've helped couples that are struggling or on the way out or whatever. So for all those people that you've helped, I have a guess on what the answer to this is. I'm curious what the actual answer is in your experience. So what is typically the driver of most of the people's problems that are in the middle of trouble, not leaving, they're not like trying to end it, but they're struggling with something or some things, or the ones that are getting ready to wrap it up? Is there a common issue between those both?
Yeah. So I'll venture to say that most of the time there's unresolved issues from their childhood. I don't know how much of a psychologist being very Freudian right now, but there's unresolved issues from their childhood that they unconsciously started replaying out in their marriage and the partner that they chose. And then again, they kind of were disappointed in that marriage. And so they're kind of on the outs because those issues from childhood were never resolved or talked through or communicated and weren't found that connection and healing in their partner like they hoped. So the author and psychologist Harville Hendricks, his premise is basically we choose people that are like our parent that we didn't get the love from. And there's a lot of new theory since he created that, but then he says we choose a partner based on trying to get that love, like get a corrected version of that in our partner, and then we're really trying to repair old wounds in the person. So it's like these expectations that we set that our partner often doesn't even know about, that then they fail to meet. And then it's not it's identified individually, and then it's not communicated interpersonally. And that's kind of what creates that dynamic that unravels, is that like those expectations being unmet. And most of the time, the evidence of that is the unraveling of like communication.
Yeah, my guess was going to be communication. So it seems like communication is a piece of it, but there's the actual, that's that's interesting to hear that, because I wasn't factoring that, like that wasn't even remotely close to my radar of what what it was possibly the driving force behind that. But so it like how is it, what's like the way to get around that? Is it, obviously if you're on the way out, maybe it's a little trickier with that one, but like if you're still in the in the relationship and that gets identified as the issue, is it just a matter of just being vocalizing it more and saying, look, A, B, C, D, this is what it is, and then having a dialogue between them to eventually try and just hash it out?
Yeah. So, and I always recommend therapy. Obviously, I'm kind of biased, but I always recommend therapy because you are able to do that in a safe space. It's a little bit difficult, if you're already arguing and you're already not on the same page, you're not really going to hear your partner's feelings or thoughts, or you don't want to hear them because you're already upset or defensive or whatever is happening for you. So, with a therapist, they can really help bring out some of these issues in a way that's safe, and you can kind of rebuild that emotional connection. So I really think that the best way to go is start working with a therapist who works with couples and helps couples kind of identify those things and identify, okay, this is where we went wrong. This is the dynamic that's going to get us on the right path. And part of that is tuning into our emotions and our needs and figuring out how our partner can meet those needs. Sometimes relationships are kind of like too far gone for that, but that's kind of part of my reason for wanting to work with people on the front end is sometimes we pick people based on these false narratives or like unhealthy narratives because we think like, oh, this is our person or whatever, we found the one. But really, we need to do that work on ourselves before we try to find somebody, because we don't want to find someone who fits an old story that we don't want to be living in anymore. So once you've done that work and you're really aware and identifying, oh, okay, these are kind of some of my pitfalls, these are some of my past like issues, this is what I need to be aware of. And sometimes, there's the common analogy of like why the girl always goes for the bad boy, like why does this always happen? And there's some narrative around there of like, oh, if I can get this guy to love me, then that means this about me. So we have to make sure we're clearing ourselves of any of those like stories of like, oh, okay, the meaning of being with someone who has a lot of money or who is a supermodel or whatever, like what's the meaning around this for us? And once you're clear on that, then you can make decisions from a place that really aligns with your values rather than trying to like fulfill this narrative or story that you think is going to make, cause happiness or whatever. I think often, they think that you can just like be a happy couple and that's it. Like, but really it's the work you put in every day that creates that. And that like love, people think like, oh, it's like love at first sight, but it's usually just attraction at first sight. And then love is kind of what comes from that, the choices that you make every day to build a solid foundation. It's built in those little moments of attuning and caring about each other. And I truly believe that you can make any marriage work. And it can be a happy one. And the answer isn't, it's not your partner's fault. It's not your fault. It's whatever they're triggering in you and you're triggering in them. And once you figure that out, you can change the dynamic.
Yeah, it's sometimes I'll think about it too. It's like, is there? I'll hear someone say something about some other relationship or something along those lines, and it's like, well, can any be salvaged? So I guess as like a precursor to that, so you're mentioning, obviously you'd have a bias towards therapy, but is there for couples, is there is there a time? Is it ever too soon to start therapy? Or I guess before that one, is it for all couples? Would you say, like, regardless? In your opinion, obviously, as unbiasedly, I guess, as you can say, should all couples be in it in some capacity? Obviously, some people are needing it more so than others, and some might not as much. But could it be used as like a preventative thing, or do you think it's more for certain couples that should do it?
Yeah. I think that if you're going in when you're already in trouble, you're going in too late. So I think that it's definitely important to go to couples therapy as a preventative measure. And a lot of people, I always recommend people to do this before you're married. So, and I had a lot of friends, and my husband and I did pre-engagement counseling. So because engagement was so important to us, we wanted to, when we were engaged, just be like, okay, that's the wedding planning. That's not like, oh, now we're engaged, let's figure out if we want to be, let's do therapy and figure out if we can make it work type of thing. So, so I really recommend, if you're in that, like, okay, we're kind of serious, like we've had some issues, like we've gone through enough life together where we kind of know what those are. I think it's good to go to couples therapy then, or premarital, kind of get some of those patterns. And then that's kind of like a preventative thing because you're aware of that. And then you could potentially, if there are some life issues or life stressors, changes in job, or you have kids or whatever, things that come up that are like new issues, going back and kind of continuing. Most times couples therapy isn't like we're in it for 30 years, our whole marriage sort of
Hopefully
thing.
not.
It's more of like, you want to do preventative work and then go for like tune-ups if there's things that you guys are falling into a rut or something. But I do think it's important to early on, when you're like, okay, we're serious, we're committed, to go for like premarital or like pre-decision counseling.
So how long, so from when you finished school to, like, how long have you been doing counseling? Let's, like, year-wise, what would you?
Yeah, so I've been a therapist for 8 years. I've been licensed for 5 years.
Okay.
And so I've seen over like 6,000 clients at this point through all my work. And it's been varied through obviously different specialties as well. So I've kind of worked with people all around the demographic globe.
Okay. So the reason I ask is about 2012-ish, so around then. So from 2012 till now, have you seen like a deterioration in the stigma behind therapy, or does it seem just as, because I think there's still a stigma behind it, but I feel like mental health and just pushing things like that have been more vocalized, I would say, in the last, at least I've noticed it more in the last couple of years. I wasn't really paying attention too much before, so I don't know if it was growing then too. But also, I feel this ties into with it as well. So from then till now, do you think it's less stigmatized than it used to be?
Yeah, I think I've definitely seen a shift. And especially obviously this year, we've seen a really high peak in people reaching out for, even though it's mostly teletherapy. But I think that there definitely has been a shift. And partially, I think it's been because people with platforms have spoken out about their own mental health struggles and, getting help as well. But I do think it's still pretty highly stigmatized, especially in certain cultural communities. And there's a lot of research being done on kind of how to shift that. But I do think in the younger generations, it's a lot more accepted and less stereotyped.
Yeah, because that's something, I'll raise my hand and admit to it. I think before, maybe around that 2012 time, like I was probably one of those people that was like, you must be a nut if you have to go. And then, as, get older, one, that helps. But also you just kind of maybe open your ears a little more and are more willing to hear about different things, people's different struggles. Like, well, okay, there's probably something behind it. Because I think, one, there's that stigma of, well, you're a crazy person. And then there's the other one that I always hear is like, well, how much of what the therapist is doing is genuine? Like, are they legitimately trying to get you? Are they trying to help you to get to whatever your goal is and then set you free, or are they trying to just like kind of keep you there long enough, like perpetually just be there?
Mhm.
So I think, and I'm sure maybe you've in your own experiences, there's obviously probably some that are not good they're not good human beings, so that trickles into them in their therapy. So they're maybe not looking out for the best interest,
Mhm.
which is honestly a terrifying prospect to think about. But I'm sure it's a reality because it's like you have a person's mental health in your hand, and you're just
Mhm.
pretty much like a voodoo doll toying with it.
Yeah.
Um, so would you? I don't know if you know any personally. I'm not saying I'm not going to ask you to say it, but personally or through hearing about it, does it seem like I would hope that's a very small minority of that profession that's like that, so we can write that off as a concern.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's definitely true. And I think that, similar to like even the medical profession, like we all know and have heard stories of doctors and even more recently, some negative stories about doctors misusing their license and their practice and abusing others through being in a position of power. So I think that that is definitely an unfortunate part of the work. But I do know. And I also work for the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists as kind of the speaker and doing some education for them. And I do know that there are so many laws and as well as a lot of ethics codes that are constantly being updated and there's a lot of gatekeepers in the profession of like, we have the complaints board and there's a lot of ways that clients can really empower themselves. But I do think that it's important to learn about the process of therapy, what it includes, kind of do your research as a consumer, and try out, do a few different calls with different therapists, see who feels like a good fit, potentially get referrals. I know, I mean, I kind of have become a resource for a lot of family and friends of, don't just see who's the top person on your insurance and just, okay, I guess I'm going to them. Like you could really be empowered in figuring out who's a good fit for you, because someone might be a very ethical therapist, but they're just not a fit for you, or they don't really specialize in what you're going through or whatever it is. So
Mhm.
you kind of have to do that research. And if you feel that discomfort kind of early on, make sure that you're tuning into that and making a decision that you feel right with. But any good therapist should be processing that with you. And if they don't feel like they're a good fit or there's some kind of thing going on that's making you uncomfortable, and they would do their due diligence and kind of give you referrals or other options too. So if you ever feel like stuck, then that's a bad sign.
Also, so I mean, now they say it makes sense. So there's times where therapists might be like, "Look, I'm probably not the right one for you, but I know someone else that I think might be here.
Oh,
Go check them out." I
yeah,
mean, that's
yeah,
good. At least there's that
yeah. Mhm.
recognition of, and not trying to just keep the person in.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So unfortunately, we're not going to get this one out on time for your seminar tomorrow, but I'd still like to kind of touch on it. So you have a seminar that you're hosting tomorrow
Yes.
about it was online dating in 2020 or just dating in 2020.
Yeah, yeah. So it's called Find Love in
There we
2020.
go.
And it's kind of the precursor training to my course, which you listeners will have time to purchase my course, which is Fall in Love by Christmas. And I basically have instilled all my years of working as a matchmaker, therapist, and dating coach into this course. It's my signature course on figuring out how you can create the mindset, matching strategy, and for meeting the right person. So I give tools in the course on the mindset strategies that really work for singles to find love through these therapeutically proven principles. Often, the advice that I've heard from clients or just people that they're getting is really from family and friends who say, "Oh, well, I met my person like this," or "This is what makes a relationship work." It's all kind of hearsay, but there's actually a lot of research that's been done in the fields of dating and love and relationships. So I've kind of condensed the most important things of figuring out how you can make sure you're in the right spot to find that relationship, and then teaching like matching strategy through online dating. I provide offline dating strategies as well if you feel like online dating is just really not your thing. And then I help all all of the people, students of the course, with figuring out how you know somebody's the right person for you, going through a virtual date, which is a norm right now, and just giving some more of those tools and application. And I really have helped a lot of clients with all this information find love. So I still believe that it's possible for people this year. A lot of people have written this year off and like, oh, I'll date in 2021, but I'll tell them, you guys were saying that in 2019. Everyone was like, 2020 is my year. And I take the unpopular viewpoint that now is a better time than ever to date and find the right person, because a lot of people are now kind of rethinking their priorities and what they really want in life. And the top thing that people want is love and relationships. And that's, a universal human desire. So I think that it's so important to, if that's something you desire, really create that mindset to invest in it.
Yeah, that's interesting. You bring up the the reasoning of writing off 2020, and then you mentioned, well, you guys were saying this in 19. I think that's pretty spot on. I was listening to a different podcast today, and the person's like, I'm pretty much done with this year. I'm like, there's still 3 months left. like let's see what happens. Like, right. But also in addition to that, I think it's if you're gonna use, obviously this year has been unique in certain aspects, but also there's gonna be some excuse that'll come up every year. Right. If you want to break it down even more, every month there's something that'll come up. It's just a matter of, and again, you've referenced this a lot. You have to have the right mindset and enter it that way. It's like many things. Like if you approach many things with well, I don't know, or it's what are the chances? Yeah, it's probably going to end up on the smaller end of those chances. Is it going to be a guarantee if you go in chipper? No, but you're going to at least, even if it doesn't work, at least you approach it with a better attitude about it, as opposed to.
Totally. Yeah. And I've seen so many clients kind of shoot themselves in the foot because they're so jaded with the dating process. They actually go on a good date, but they're in such a negative headspace that they can't be positive, and nobody likes negative energy. So you're not going to attract anybody if that's kind of the energy you're embodying. So I always say, there's things we can't control in life or our dating, or our love lives. And that's, timing, we can't control that. And we can't control chemistry, whether we feel it or not, but there are things you can control. So, which are mindset and your own psychological well-being and your effort, your investment, the action you take, what you put into it. So it's really time, if you value this and want to find the other person, it's time that you work on what you can control. So when those other puzzle pieces come into play, then you're ready for it, and not like, oh no, it was the perfect person, but my mindset was all messed up. I was still nursing old wounds from past relationship, whatever was still going on with you. You don't want it to pass you by. So in this course, I'm really going to help you be in that space. So then you're ready for that to happen for you.
Awesome. Okay. So last one for you before we will sign off is, so, you've accomplished a great deal of things. You've gone through all of this, this journey of yours from school to eHarmony to all these different things. Now you have your own shop. Through all of this, you've obviously encountered, I'm sure, some difficulties. How have you been able to overcome them? Would you, read books about, read books about it? Would you talk with people? How have you been able to power through your struggles to, get to where you are and keep going forward?
Yeah, so I actually did my dissertation or research on this, which is the concept of resilience. So something that I studied in studying Armenian women was the ways that resilience is passed down in our culture, and how our culture, the Armenian culture, is one that's kind of overcome so much in our history. And although a lot of that trauma has been passed down, so has the resilience and perseverance. So I've found that personality trait is one that I've really embodied and tried to strengthen. And one of the ways that I've done that is through that, personal development, which is a combination of learning and what I consume, as well as putting it into action. So same with what I help people in their dating lives with, is that you can consume all this information, but if you're not practicing it and learning from it and taking the failures as a learning opportunity, then you're not going to really get the most out of that. So I think that really building my own resilience and working on my mindset daily is really what's been helpful to overcoming those obstacles, and just knowing that it's all kind of working out for a purpose. All those years that I was single served for a really great purpose for me because I learned so much. And if I was one of those quote unquote lucky ones that, got married out of college or whatever, then I wouldn't have had all this experience to share with other people. So I think that we can all look back on our story and see something like that and say, oh, okay, like if this didn't happen, then this wouldn't have. And when we kind of have that viewpoint that, like if you believe in God, like everything's working out for your benefit and that life is like friendly instead of out to get you, then you're going to kind of use all of those things as part of your story too. So I think that I've seen that, but I really think that in the daily grind, as you say, like that's where it's built. That's where the character's built. So I really work on that daily within myself and noticing if any of those negative thoughts or beliefs come up and using my own strategies to help clear those.
Yeah, I think those are all very key to be able to, but that's also interesting with the dissertation you did.
Yeah.
Kind of as you talked through it, I thought about, I'm like, yeah, I kind of do see that common theme.
So true. Yeah. Yeah. And it's inspiring. And I think that like we all have those stories in our past of like, wow, like our families or friends or people we know, like one of the most inspiring things is to read autobiographies and be like, man, these people we look up to went through some stuff. Like, I know we all think 2020 is bad, but they went through a lot. And we can really learn from them and say like, maybe we saw them at this point in their journey, but we didn't see all of that it took to get there. So that I think is inspiring too, because nowadays we all see the Instagram filtered photos and the kind of perfect life that people have, but knowing that that's not the norm or the expectation can kind of relieve you of that pressure and then give you some of that hope and inspiration too.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for your time, Dr. Christie. This was very, very interesting and nice to hear your perspective on all of these topics and hear about your journey. So where can people find you? And also, you were mentioning, your courses, all that. So go ahead, please share all that with us.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at the Date Dr. Christie. That's where I'm most active. It's the Date Doctor, DOCTOR, and Christie spelled CHRISTIE. I'm sure you guys will post it in your notes. Mm-hmm. And then on my website, drchristiekederian.com. And if you have an inquiry to work one-on-one or want to hear about my course, you can see the links to that on my website. And I'm also giving a special offer for 10% off my course to all the Forked Road listeners. So I'll give the coupon code, but it'll be the Forked Road. And if you go on my website and purchase the course and put that coupon code in, you'll get 10% off. And yeah, I'm just excited to connect with you and all of the listeners of the show and, be a resource in any way that I can as well.
Awesome. Great. Yeah, that's a nice little perk for people to have too. Obviously, you've shared a great deal of helpful information here, so I'm sure there's so much more that people can learn from you. So thanks again, Dr. Christie. This was very awesome, helpful, and informative. Thank you again.
Awesome. Thanks, Benoit.
You got it. You too.